December 2017. A real estate agent walks into a Toronto mansion and finds the bodies of Barry and Honey Sherman, Canada's billionaire pharmaceutical couple. The early police theory was murder-suicide. The family rejected it outright, hired private investigators, and posted a $35 million reward for information. Years later, not a single arrest. To understand why, you have to start with the empire Barry Sherman built. In 1974, an MIT-trained astrophysicist named Barry Sherman took a modest two-person operation in Toronto and founded Apotex. He had spent the 1960s working at his late uncle's drug firm, Empire Laboratories, where he learned the mechanics of pharmaceutical manufacturing. With Apotex, he set out to build something far larger. Over the next 4 decades, he transformed this startup into Canada's largest generic drug manufacturer, employing more than 10,000 people and exporting to more than 115 countries. But Sherman didn't build this multi-billion-dollar empire by playing nice with the global medical establishment. His business model relied on a highly aggressive strategy of patent challenges. Instead of waiting decades for lucrative brand-name drug patents to expire, Sherman used the legal system as an offensive weapon. He systematically filed challenges to invalidate patents on blockbuster medications like the antidepressant Paxil and the blood pressure drug Norvasc. For Apotex, litigation was the actual engine of growth. Sherman dragged giant pharmaceutical companies into courtrooms again and again, forcing favorable settlements, or winning the right to launch cheaper generic copies years ahead of schedule. This confrontational model worked. It drove down medicine prices for consumers, but it also made Apotex a dominant global force and turned Sherman into a billionaire with a net worth estimated at over $3 billion. This aggressive drive earned him a reputation as a combative disruptor, but it also meant that as his wealth grew, Barry Sherman spent decades accumulating incredibly powerful corporate adversaries. In 2007, 4 of Barry Sherman's first cousins, the children of his late uncle, Lewis Lloyd Winter, filed a massive lawsuit against him. The cousins, known in Canada as the Winter Orphans, claimed Barry had built his multi-billion-dollar empire on a broken promise. When their father died in the 1960s, Barry bought Empire Laboratories. The cousins alleged that as part of the transition, Barry promised them a 5% stake in Apotex and a guaranteed job at the company once they turned 21. They claimed he had used their family assets to fund his rise, then abandoned them. For more than a decade, this dispute dragged through the Ontario court system. It was a bitter, highly public feud that turned close relatives into active enemies, casting a heavy shadow over Barry's personal life. The pressure peaked in September 2017, when a judge finally dismissed the lawsuit, calling the cousins' claims wishful thinking and an abuse of process. The court ordered the plaintiffs to pay Barry's legal costs, and just days before his death in December, Barry won a $300,000 costs award against his cousin, Carrie Winter. The courts had ruled in Barry's favor, but the decades of intense family resentment did not simply disappear. On the morning of December 15, 2017, real estate agent Elise Stern arrived at 50 Old Colony Road in Toronto's quiet North York neighborhood. The multi-million-dollar mansion was on the market, and Stern was preparing the property for an open house. At approximately 9:30 in the morning, she walked down to the basement pool area. Inside the humid room, she found 75-year-old Barry Sherman and his 70-year-old wife, Honey, side by side near the water. They were fully clothed, positioned in a semi-seated posture on the pool deck. Men's leather belts were looped around their necks and secured to a low metal railing that ran along the edge of the pool. Both were dead. The discovery immediately transformed a private family home into the site of Canada's most high-profile active investigation. Honey Sherman was a powerful force in her own right, a well-known philanthropist who served on major hospital and university boards and directed millions to healthcare and community causes. Her presence at the pool deck meant this was far more than a corporate dispute or a business saga. It was a deeply personal tragedy that devastated the city's civic circles. As emergency vehicles lined the cold, quiet street, the initial shock of the discovery began to spread. The architect of a global pharmaceutical empire and his partner in life and charity were gone. From these first moments, the scene in the basement pool room defied simple explanation, leaving investigators, friends, and family with a sudden, suffocating silence where there should have been answers. Within hours of the discovery, a specific narrative began taking shape behind the yellow police tape. Toronto police publicly termed the deaths suspicious, but behind closed doors and in early media leaks, investigators floated a highly specific theory: an alleged murder-suicide. The house had no signs of forced entry. The physical layout, two bodies suspended by leather belts from a pool railing, seemed to early responders to point to a tragic domestic end. The unproven theory suggested Barry had killed Honey before taking his own life. For a shocked public, this clean explanation offered a quick, if devastating, resolution. It wrapped up a terrifying event in a neat, tragic bow, but this early framing relied heavily on what was assumed rather than what was actually proven. Investigators on the scene had not found a suicide note. They had not yet completed a detailed forensic analysis of the ligatures, nor had they fully processed the physical evidence in the humid pool room. Yet, the narrative of a wealthy couple's private despair quickly dominated the front pages, shaping how Canada first understood the tragedy. It was an official-sounding answer that temporarily quieted the mounting questions, even as the physical reality of the crime scene quietly began to push back against the tidy, convenient hypothesis. The Shermans' 4 adult children rejected this explanation immediately. They hired prominent Toronto defense lawyer Brian Greenspan, who quickly assembled an independent team of investigators. This team included Tom Klatt, a retired homicide detective with decades of experience, and Dr. David Kyason, the former chief forensic pathologist for Ontario. The private team conducted their own independent autopsies and physically examined the pool area. Their findings directly challenged the police's early working theory. They revealed that both Barry and Honey had been strangled with belts after their hands were tied, a configuration highly inconsistent with self-inflicted death, indicating the scene had been professionally staged. In late January 2018, faced with these independent findings, the Toronto Police Service officially pivoted, reclassifying the case as a targeted double homicide. Yet, years later, the investigation remained stalled. To break the deadlock, the family announced a $10 million reward, which Barry's son, Jonathan Sherman, later increased to an unprecedented $35 million. To this day, the bounty remains unclaimed. Instead of answers, the public is left with a web of unresolved questions. Who was the unidentified individual with the distinctive gait captured on security footage near the property on the night of December 13th? How did the killer gain access to the home without any signs of forced entry? And who ultimately stood to benefit from the sudden elimination of Canada's most litigious billionaire? With no arrests, no named suspects, and a $35 million reward still active, the double murder of Barry and Honey Sherman endures as one of the most chilling unsolved mysteries in Canadian history. Subscribe for more investigations into the dark side of wealth and power. Today, the Sherman mansion is gone, but the silence remains. If billions cannot buy justice, what hope does the average citizen have? This case proves that some secrets are simply too expensive to expose. Subscribe for more deep dives into the shadows of wealth and power.